My in-laws went to Hawaii and left me alone with their supposedly disabled niece. Minutes later, she stood up and told me everything. Michael left the morning they all flew to Hawaii. He kissed my cheek, called me a saint for agreeing to help out, and didn't look back when he closed the front door. I stood there for a moment, holding my travel bag in one hand, the silence of that enormous house already pressing in on me like a weight I couldn't name. I didn't want to come. I didn't agree to anything, but they made it sound like it was already decided. Not a request, not a conversation, just a statement of fact. And Michael, my husband, treated it like an errand. Something I was obviously supposed to do, because who else would they ask? The drive up the winding estate road felt like entering a different world. The Stanton house sat behind tall wrought iron gates that clicked shut the second I passed through. 3 stories of pale stone and glass that always looked cold, even in the sun. The inside smelled like wax polish and dust and money. Every step echoed. Every hallway felt longer than it should have been. I'd been there before, plenty of times, for holidays and family dinners. But this was different. This time I was alone. I found Lily in the east wing, 3rd floor. The nursery suite, Vivian still called it, even though nothing in there was suited for a child anymore. The wallpaper was faded, tiny blue lambs running across yellowing clouds. A mechanical lift stretched from the side of the bed to a track on the ceiling, the kind they use in hospitals. The room felt like a museum display. Preserved, untouched, staged. Lily was lying in the center of the large bed, flat on her back, tucked in so tightly it made me uncomfortable. She didn't respond when I said her name. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Her eyes were open, unmoving, her skin pale like paper. Her dark hair was brushed and parted with precision. Her hands folded on her chest, like someone had posed her. A small feeding tube disappeared into her nostril, taped carefully at the side. A monitor beside her showed heart rate and blood oxygen, nothing else. I waited for a nurse to appear. I searched for a binder, a care schedule, medication instructions. There was nothing. Just Lily, the machines, and me. I went through the whole house looking for supplies. I found diapers in a linen closet, some unopened boxes of medical gloves, a few syringes without labels, a mini fridge in the downstairs pantry with half-used vials of clear liquid, and no explanation for what any of it was. I called Michael. He didn't pick up. I texted him. Where are the instructions? No reply. I called Vivian's number. Voicemail. Robert didn't answer either. That first night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me sit up. Every time Lily's monitor beeped, I rushed into her room. Nothing changed. She never moved. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I kept trying to tell myself that this was just how it was, that they hadn't lied, that this was her condition, that I'd simply underestimated the situation. The second night, I walked into her room at midnight and saw that her blanket had fallen onto the floor. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't gone in since dinner. The way it had landed, bunched and wrinkled near the foot of the bed, didn't make sense if it had just slipped. I asked myself if the air conditioning had blown it, if I'd imagined it. But the room was still. The vents were silent, and her hands were no longer folded on her chest. I stayed up the rest of the night sitting in the chair beside her bed, watching her, trying not to blink. She didn't move, not even once, but I could swear her eyes were following me now. Subtle, barely there, but enough. I leaned in close. Can you hear me? I whispered. No response. Lily, if you can hear me, blink once. I waited. Nothing. The next morning, her hands were folded again, the blanket back in place. Her lips looked dry. Her breathing seemed faster. I tried spoon-feeding her water, but her mouth stayed shut. I tried asking again. Blink once for yes, twice for no. This time, she blinked once. Slowly, deliberately. I froze. Are you in pain? 2 blinks. No, can you move? 1 blink. Yes. Do they know? She blinked again. 1 time. It wasn't a disorder. Not like they'd said. This wasn't a case of miscommunication or medical misunderstanding. This little girl was pretending, or being forced to pretend, and I didn't know why. By the end of the first week, I documented every strange thing. Every time I left and returned to the room, something would be slightly different. The angle of her head, the position of her pillow, the drawer I'd left open, closed. The monitor once turned off entirely. She began blinking in sequences. Once for yes, twice for no, then 3 blinks for I don't know. For 4 I can't say. I felt like I was living inside a locked diary, one with pages I hadn't been given permission to read. I asked if she wanted me to call someone. She blinked no. I asked if she trusted me. She blinked once. The first emotion I saw from her was on day 9, when I brought in my laptop and played some quiet music. Her eyes widened. Barely, but it was enough. She blinked once. Then again. Then again. Like she was trying to say more than yes. Like it was the first sound she'd heard in years. I went through Vivian's study. I knew I wasn't supposed to. I didn't care. I found paperwork, scans, letters from doctors, emails to clinics that were never followed up on. A discharge note from a specialist that said Lily had no significant impairments. No diagnosis. Just a vague note. Child presents inconsistently. Further psychological evaluation advised. It was dated 3 years ago. I remembered the year. That's when they stopped bringing her to family functions. That's when the nurse first appeared. I found photos of her, standing, laughing, hugging Amanda, taken months after the supposed onset of her condition. None of this made sense unless you looked at it through the worst lens possible. Control. Image. Secrecy. I started sleeping with the door locked, a chair jammed beneath the handle. I wasn't afraid of Lily. I was afraid of what they'd done to her. Of what they might do if they found out she was communicating with me. I couldn't leave. I had no way off the estate. They'd taken the keys. My car was gone. My phone stopped connecting to Wi-Fi. So I stayed. And every day, Lily blinked more, told me more, and I wrote it all down. Because eventually, they'd come back. And I needed to know what I was dealing with before they did. I was standing at the stove stirring a pot of soup I didn't really want to eat, just going through the motions because it was something to do, something to fill the space and the silence that had settled over the house like a thick, suffocating fog. I was alone in a house that didn't feel like a house, caring for a child who wasn't supposed to speak or move, with no one answering their phones, no car, no connection to the outside world beyond the gray marble walls and locked gates of the Stanton estate. I hadn't even noticed the shift in the air behind me, the soft scuff of bare feet against polished tile, until I turned to reach for the pepper grinder and saw her. She was standing in the doorway. Lily, on her own 2 feet. Awake, alert, silent, but not in the way they said. Not frozen, not unconscious, not trapped inside a failing body. She looked like any other 8-year-old child, maybe a little thinner, a little more fragile, but there she was, upright, steady, staring at me with wide eyes that seemed too knowing for her age. I dropped the spoon. It hit the floor with a clatter and soup splattered across my shoes. I didn't even move to wipe it. I couldn't. My brain short-circuited in that moment, incapable of processing what I was seeing. I had been in that house for hours, feeding her with syringes, wiping her motionless face with damp cloths, watching monitors that beeped their monotone reassurance, and now she was just standing there. Then she spoke. "They want my $4 million, she said, her voice hoarse like it hadn't been used in years, but clear and deliberate. Help me. I couldn't breathe. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I felt like my limbs had turned to stone. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the tremble in her hands, the way her fingers curled into the hem of her nightgown, the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes that hadn't quite fallen yet. She stepped closer. Her knees didn't wobble. Her posture didn't falter. "Please," she said, softer now, urgent and small and real in a way that hit me like a fist to the chest. "Don't tell them. If they know I told you, they'll lock me up again." "What are you talking about?" I finally managed, my voice shaky, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. "What is going on, Lily?" "They made me pretend," she said. "Since I was 3. After Grandma and Grandpa died. The money they left me, it's mine. But I can't touch it until I'm 18 unless I'm not right. If I'm sick, if I'm declared unfit." I dropped to my knees on the kitchen floor, the soup forgotten, and reached out without thinking. "Lily, who did this to you?" "My mom," she whispered. "And Grandma Vivian. And Grandpa Robert, too, sometimes. They made me take things. Pills. Shots. To make me sleepy. To make me weak. The nurse, she helped them. And when I stopped reacting to the medicine, they said I was having episodes. They told me if I didn't act right, they'd send me away forever." I stared at her like I was seeing her for the first time. And maybe I was. Not the silent doll laid out in a bed of satin and wires, but the scared, brilliant, furious little girl standing barefoot in my kitchen telling me that the people who were supposed to protect her had been drugging and imprisoning her for 5 years. "Why now?" I asked, my voice low, trying to keep it steady, though my hands were shaking. "Why tell me?" "Because you're alone. They're gone. They won't be back for 2 weeks. I can move, I can walk. I can be myself, for a little while. And I need someone. I need you. Please, don't leave me." I didn't know what to say, what to do. There was no handbook for this. No protocol for uncovering a slow-burning nightmare inside a mansion filled with secrets and silence. But I nodded. I took her hand. It was small and cold and very real. "I won't leave," I said. "I promise." And in that moment, I understood everything I hadn't before. The camera wires cut. The missing instructions. The strange, sterile quiet. The way no one had even pretended to ask if I was okay with being here. I wasn't meant to help Lily. I was meant to witness nothing, to keep the illusion alive, to feed and bathe a ghost of a child while they sipped cocktails in the sun and schemed. But Lily wasn't a ghost. She was alive, awake, aware, and if she was ready to fight, then so was I. The next morning, Lily woke me before dawn. She was already dressed in a sweater too big for her and socks that kept slipping down her ankles, standing quietly at the edge of my bed, her face more focused than I'd ever seen it. "We need to start now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but steady. "Before they check in. Before anything gets moved." I didn't ask what she meant by that. I didn't need to. I just followed her. She led me through the east hallway with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every inch of the estate. She moved differently now, her steps still cautious, her hands sometimes brushing the walls for balance. But this wasn't the girl they'd left in that bed. This was someone awake, alert, dangerous in the way only someone smart enough to have been quiet for too long could be. We reached Vivian's study, a sharp-cornered room lined with lacquered bookshelves and a massive antique desk that looked like it had never once been used for anything honest. Lily moved straight toward the tall armoire against the wall, the one I'd assumed was just decorative. "She keeps the key behind the mirror," she said, pointing at a gilded frame above the fireplace. I watched her climb up onto the cold stone ledge, reaching behind the heavy gold trim without hesitation. Her fingers found it fast, a small brass key that looked too delicate to matter, but slid into the cabinet lock with a soft, precise click. The doors opened on a set of deep drawers and file boxes, all neatly labeled, all perfectly organized in that way rich people like to pretend isn't sinister. I started pulling things out while Lily hovered beside me, reading over my shoulder, occasionally pointing out what mattered. First, the medical records. Dozens of them. Typed letters from doctors I'd never heard of, each stamped with official seals, and filled with clinical language describing developmental delays, degenerative symptoms, unverified but concerning neurological markers. Some were vague, some more elaborate, but all of them were signed by the same hand, Dr. Byron Kessler, a name that came up again and again. A letter dated just 2 months ago claimed Lily was nonverbal, functionally paralyzed, and incapable of independent living. But there were inconsistencies, contradictions about her motor function, notes duplicated from older forms, dates mismatched in strange ways. And at the bottom of one, I found an internal memo addressed to Vivian herself, thanking her for her continued discretion regarding patient management. Then came the financials, trust documents, legal filings, investment accounts in Lily's name with balances that made my stomach turn. Over $4 million spread across 6 accounts, all tightly controlled by Amanda Stanton as primary trustee. I found a folder titled Estate Planning, with a document dated 5 years ago, around the time Lily said it all started, detailing a petition to transfer permanent financial guardianship to Amanda on the grounds of Lily's irreversible mental incapacitation. That was the word they kept using. Incapacitation. Repeated over and over like an incantation meant to erase everything else about her. Beside it was a list of approved expenditures from Lily's accounts. Private flights, renovations on Amanda's condo, payments to a private nurse specialist who didn't exist in any employment database I could find, and email printouts, pages and pages of them. Conversations between Amanda and Robert, Amanda and Vivian, Amanda and someone at a law firm in D.C., discussing timelines, strategy, updates on medical compliance, and one message that simply read, "Once the formal ruling comes through, she won't need a bedroom anymore. Just storage." I felt sick. Lily knelt beside me and pulled another file from the bottom drawer. She held it open and pointed to a diagram I couldn't make sense of at first, until I realized it was a blueprint of the nursery suite. My stomach dropped. Marked in red were 5 locations: behind the vent, inside the stuffed bear's eye, above the mirror, under the bedside lamp, and inside the corner molding near the closet. I didn't want to believe it, but we checked each one, carefully, quietly, and they were all there. Tiny black cameras, each no larger than a coin, all wired into the walls. Watching her sleep, watching her sit, watching everything. I found the receiver unit hidden inside a locked drawer beneath the bed, hardwired into the house's network. She had been monitored every second, from every angle. There was no privacy, no mercy. I sat on the floor of that cursed room with evidence scattered around me, documents that could ruin lives, expose crimes, shatter reputations, and all I could think about was how she'd survived. This little girl, told to shut up and disappear, drugged and paraded like a mannequin for people who called themselves family, had stayed alive in the quietest, most terrifying way imaginable. And now, somehow, we were in it together. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Not after everything we found. I lay there in the dark with Lily curled up beside me in the guest room, her small frame shivering under the covers no matter how many times I adjusted the blanket. The cameras were still active in her old room. We checked, but in the guest room, there was no surveillance, No wires, no glint of glass hidden in stuffed animals, no unnatural hum beneath the furniture. Just silence. Finally, the kind you could trust. As soon as it was light, I made the call. Lauren Bishop had been my college roommate, and we'd stayed close even as life had pulled us into completely different orbits. She went into law, focusing on family court and children's rights. I didn't give her time to say hello. I just started talking. I told her everything. Not the cleaned-up version. The real version. The drugging. The false diagnoses. The locked cabinet. The surveillance. The inheritance. I didn't stop until I was shaking so badly I had to sit down. She didn't say I was crazy. She didn't tell me to calm down. She just asked one question. Do you have proof? That's when the real work started. For the next 2 days, I documented everything. I took hundreds of photographs of the files, the bank statements, the blueprints, the medication bottles without labels. I recorded videos walking through the surveillance setup, narrating what each component was and where we found it. I scanned everything I could lift from that office and uploaded it to a cloud drive I created using an account not linked to me, password protected, double authenticated, backed up across multiple devices. I bought Lily a burner phone using cash, added Lauren's number, my own, the local child protection services, and programmed it so all she had to do was press a single icon. I set up a code phrase, something that wouldn't raise suspicion if overheard, but would tell me immediately if she was in danger. We practiced it together until she could say it without thinking. At night, I read to her. During the day, we practiced talking. Real talking. Like the kind she'd have to do if someone official finally listened to her. I coached her on staying calm, on describing the timeline, on sticking to facts and what she remembered. But I also reminded her it wasn't her job to prove anything. It was mine. Hers was just to be brave. She was more than brave. I taught her simple defense techniques, how to block, how to twist out of a grip, how to use her elbows and knees if someone grabbed her. It was basic, just enough to give her some control, a little power in a body that had been denied it for too long. She took it all in with a focus I hadn't expected. She was a fast learner, methodical, always thinking 2 steps ahead. She asked questions I didn't know how to answer. What if they get here early? What if they bring someone else? What if they say I'm crazy? I didn't lie. I told her they might. That they would try. But that she wasn't alone anymore. We painted together too. Played card games. Made up a silly dance routine to an old 90s pop song I found in one of the estate's ancient CD cabinets. I watched her laugh. Real, unguarded laughter. For the first time, and it nearly broke me in half. Because I knew what was coming. And no amount of preparation would make that part easier. But I kept going. Because now I wasn't just the girl they married into their web. I wasn't just the schoolteacher from a modest family they thought they could push around. I was the one standing between them and the girl they thought they'd silenced forever. And I wasn't going to let them win. It was 3:07 a.m. when the headlights hit the upstairs wall. I was sitting in the guest room, cross-legged on the floor beside Lily's mattress, whispering through the last chapter of a fantasy novel she'd picked off the shelf. Her eyes were half-lidded with sleep, the rhythm of her breathing slow and soft, when I saw the shifting light patterns through the window blinds and felt my entire chest go cold. The gate shouldn't open until Tuesday. I checked the itinerary 3 times. They weren't supposed to be back for 3 more days. But I knew better. People like the Stantons didn't do things on schedule. They didn't come home early because of storms or emergencies. They came home to catch people off guard. I didn't even have time to think. I just grabbed Lily's hand, yanked her up, whispered, "We need to go now," and ran. She didn't ask questions. She moved fast, silent, already understanding that this was real danger. We slipped through the side corridor like shadows, down the long, echoing hall, back into the nursery she hated. I helped her into the bed, pulled the blanket up, repositioned the feeding tube like we practiced, turned the monitor back on. My hands were shaking. I tucked her hair behind her ear, gave her one last look, one last silent, "Please," and then sprinted back into the hallway just as I heard the front door open. The sound of heels against marble was unmistakable. Vivian. First. Always first. Her voice carried sharp and clipped as it echoed off the stone. Michael, get the luggage later. I want to see her first. Then Amanda, softer but somehow colder. Make sure the cameras were on this whole time. I don't want another incident. I stepped out of the hallway like I had just woken up, like I hadn't been hiding evidence for the last week. I rubbed my eyes, faked a yawn, said something about the early hour, and forced a smile that tasted like iron. Vivian barely acknowledged me. She just walked past, up the stairs, her heels ticking like a metronome of suspicion. I followed slowly, already trying to think through my next steps, already imagining what I would do if they checked the guest room, already picturing Lauren's voice in my head. Stay calm, Jessica. Don't escalate. Don't give them control. It might have worked if Lily had stayed in that bed. But she didn't. 20 minutes later, while Robert and Vivian examined the medical cabinet and Amanda flipped through the surveillance logs on her tablet, Lily walked down the stairs. On her own, standing tall, her steps light, her chin up. She walked like a child who had finally remembered what it meant to own her body. "Hi, Mom," she said, clear and bright and steady. "I feel much better." The silence that followed was immediate and violent. Amanda turned, eyes wide, mouth slightly open like she hadn't registered the words yet. Vivian's face went white, then red. Robert stood up so fast his chair hit the ground behind him. The tablet slid from Amanda's fingers and hit the rug with a dull thud. Then the screaming started. "What the hell did you do?" Amanda shouted, charging across the foyer. "Lily, what are you doing? What is this?" Her voice cracked, not with fear, but rage, the kind of rage that came from losing control, not concern. Lily stepped back instinctively, her body flattening into the wall, but she didn't cry. She didn't look away. Vivian grabbed for the pill case on the sideboard, snapping open compartments, muttering under her breath. "She needs it now. We can't let her. Jessica, where's the nurse? Where's her dosage?" Robert had already moved toward her, hands out like he meant to pin her to the floor. Lily flinched. That's when I stepped between them. "Don't touch her." Amanda whirled on me, eyes full of something unhinged. You did this. What did you give her? Did you stop her meds? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I didn't blink. "Yeah, I do. They didn't even try to hide it. Not anymore." Vivian was yelling about psychiatric orders, about legal guardianship, about containment protocols. Amanda was shouting that she was going to sue me for endangerment. Robert was reaching for Lily again. She was shaking now, backing toward the stairs, the moment finally catching up to her body. And that's when she said the phrase. The code. It was a sentence about the stars, something small, something only we knew, slipped into her voice like an emergency flare. And I pulled out my phone. And I made the call. I stood my ground. Amanda was still yelling. Robert pacing like a dog too tightly leashed, Vivian clutching that pill case in her hand like it was sacred scripture. The moment Lily said the code phrase, everything shifted. I knew there was no more pretending, no more stalling. So I faced them full on and let it all out. "You drugged a child for 5 years," I said, loud enough to cut through every noise in that house. "You isolated her. You faked diagnoses, falsified documents, installed hidden cameras to monitor her every breath. And for what? Her money? A trust fund? Control?" Vivian's mouth opened, but I kept going. "I've reported everything. It's done. I'm not afraid of you. You think I didn't expect this reaction? You think I didn't prepare?" Amanda's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." I laughed, bitter and hard. "Lauren Bishop has the files. She's already spoken to the authorities. You don't scare me. You're the ones who should be terrified. They called the police anyway." "Of course they did." Amanda grabbed the landline like she was placing an order, not screaming about betrayal. She spun some story about a hysterical woman who'd gone rogue, a child being manipulated, a family under siege. I didn't interrupt. I just waited. Exactly 12 minutes later, I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, then the doorbell. Calm, measured, official. I walked to the door without looking back, opened it to find a uniformed officer flanked by another plainclothes detective and a woman with a badge that read, Child Protective Services, Senior Caseworker. And behind them, standing calmly with a folder clutched under one arm, was Lauren. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She didn't need to. "We've received a formal report regarding potential abuse of a minor," the caseworker said. "We'd like to speak to the child privately." I stepped aside. "She's upstairs. Her name is Lily. She's waiting." Robert tried to block them. He stepped forward, chest puffed like a man used to issuing orders in a boardroom. "We have rights. This is our home. You can't just walk in." But the detective was already raising a hand. "We're acting on a filed claim with supporting documentation from a licensed legal representative and third-party medical expert. Step aside, sir." That was the beginning of the end. Lauren followed them inside. She handed over her folder. Copies of the files we'd scanned, the photographs, the surveillance maps, even the blueprint showing camera placements in a child's bedroom. The officer flipped through it without expression. The social worker was already heading upstairs. I stayed near the entryway while they worked. I heard Amanda trying to spin her version of the story in the hallway. I heard Vivian muttering something about mental instability and slander. And then I heard Lily's voice. Calm, controlled, telling her story like we'd practiced. Only it wasn't practiced. It was real. And she didn't flinch. When Robert realized the tide had shifted, he tried to take a different route. I watched him pull the detective aside, watched his hand move to his jacket pocket. "Listen," he murmured. "This is a family misunderstanding. Surely there's a way we can make this disappear." He pulled out a white envelope, thick and sealed. The detective didn't blink. Are you offering me a bribe, sir? It's just a goodwill gesture, Robert said, eyes darting. The officer didn't respond. He pulled out a small body camera clipped to his chest, tapped the blinking light. You're being recorded. Amanda snapped. It was Dad's idea, she shouted from across the room. He said it was temporary, just until we saved the company. He said no one would get hurt. Vivian hissed at her. Be quiet. But it was too late. The words hung there like smoke after a fire. The house felt smaller, the air thicker. No one moved. The detective turned to me. We're opening an official investigation. Until we conclude, the child will be placed in protective custody. And you? He looked at Robert, then at Amanda, then at Vivian. Are not to have any contact with her. Not one word. Lily came down the stairs with the caseworker, holding her hand. She didn't look at her mother, or her grandfather, or the woman who had once called herself her grandmother. She looked at me, and I nodded. 3 months later, I stood outside the courthouse with Lily's hand in mine, waiting for the clerk to return with the stamped paperwork that made everything official. The hearing had lasted less than 30 minutes. The judge didn't need more than the file Lauren submitted, the reports from social services, Lily's own testimony, and the mountain of evidence we'd spent weeks building. No one from the Stanton family contested the motion. No lawyers showed up to argue otherwise. Just silence on their side of the bench and the faint scrape of pens across paper on ours. Temporary guardian. That was the legal term. But when the judge said it aloud, I felt something heavier than law settle into place. It wasn't just responsibility, it was trust. Not just care, but belief. Lily sat beside me in her new navy blue dress, her hair braided the way she liked it now, not the way Amanda used to insist. She didn't look scared anymore, just steady. She knew what today meant. Amanda had pleaded out, admitted to her part. Fraud, child abuse, conspiracy to defraud an estate. She confessed in a single breath that it was Dad's idea, repeated again in court, this time on record. Robert tried to fight it. He always thought he could intimidate his way out of anything, but the bribery attempt, caught on body cam, sealed his fate. Multiple charges, including coercion and obstruction, and the weight of every falsified document stacked against him. James was charged too, complicity, enabling, turning away while it happened under his roof. Even Vivian, who barely said a word during the investigation, couldn't outrun the paper trail of financial siphoning from Lily's trust fund. They thought they could get away with it because no one was watching. They were wrong. Michael showed up at the second hearing alone. No tie, no ring, just a tired look that I'd never seen on him before. Afterward, he asked to talk. Not about legal things. About us. About what came next. He said he was sorry, but not in the scripted way people use when they're scared. He said he'd left the family for good. Started his own consulting firm. Walked away from the estate. He wanted to try, really try, to make things right with me. And I didn't forgive him right away. But I agreed to couples therapy, one session at a time. Because the truth was, he never touched $1 of Lily's money. He never signed a form. And when he finally saw what they did, he didn't hesitate. He cut the cord. Lily's world changed in ways that would have terrified the old version of her. She started school that fall, real school, with real teachers and real friends and a desk of her own. She was nervous the first week, couldn't sleep the night before, clung to my hand in the drop-off line. But the day she came home beaming about the science club, I knew something had shifted. She wasn't hiding anymore. We started walking to the park every weekend. At first, just us. Then, little by little, with her new friends. She laughed more, asked questions, wanted to learn how to cook. She wrote poems on sticky notes and stuck them to the fridge. She joined a local kids' martial arts class, not because she wanted to fight, but because she wanted to feel strong. She told me once, quietly, that she was learning to like her voice again, that she didn't have to whisper anymore. Therapy helped too. She went twice a week at first, then once. Her therapist, Kendra, said she had never met a child with such clarity of memory and such sharp emotional intelligence. Lily talked through the years, the lies, the pain, and the fact that she still felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. We worked through that together. I still checked on her at night sometimes, just to see her sleeping like any other kid, mouth open, limbs tangled in the blanket. Not strapped to a monitor, not watched by a lens, not drugged or silenced or made small. Just Lily. Whole, brilliant, free. And I never stopped holding space for that version of her. The one who waited years to say a single sentence that would change everything. The one who stood in the kitchen doorway and asked for help. She saved herself. I just stood beside her while she did it. After the court hearings settled and Lily began school again, I started waking up without dread sitting heavy on my chest. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because the fear had lost its grip. It was in that stillness, in the quiet that used to haunt me, that something unexpected began to grow. Lauren and I were sitting in my kitchen one night, papers spread between us, talking about all the holes in the system. How many people had looked the other way, how many signs were there for years and ignored. And it was her idea first, but we finished it together. We called it the LEF Fund, Legal, Emotional, and Advocacy Foundation. It was meant to support children like Lily, the ones whose voices were overlooked, the ones buried under reports and signatures in silence. We started small. A website, a donation portal, a place for families to reach out. Within weeks, the inbox filled with stories. Not all as extreme as Lily's, but all real, all painful, all needing someone to listen. We created grants for legal aid, connected therapists and social workers who specialized in trauma hidden behind closed doors, worked with clinics to spot red flags in cases where symptoms didn't add up. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing more than surviving something. I was changing something. Lily threw her first real birthday party in the backyard that summer. Nothing extravagant. Just a dozen kids from school, balloons she picked out herself, a cake with more sprinkles than frosting, and a playlist she spent 3 days curating. I let her plan it all. She wanted a piñata shaped like a cloud. She wanted pizza cut into hearts. She wanted to wear her favorite hoodie, even though it was almost 80 degrees. I said yes to all of it, because it was hers. Halfway through the party, she ran up to me, her face flushed and glowing, and she said, "This is the best day ever." I didn't think I'd ever get one. I didn't cry in front of her. I waited until later, when the cake was crumbs and the balloons were drifting against the ceiling, and she was asleep with glitter on her forehead. It wasn't until early fall, standing on the front steps after school one quiet Tuesday, that she asked it. She was holding her backpack with both hands, still wearing one shoe because the other had fallen off somewhere between the car and the porch. The sun was low behind her, turning her hair into a halo, and she looked up at me with that expression I'd come to recognize, when something mattered more than she was ready to say. "Can I call you Mom forever?" I didn't think. I didn't need to. I bent down to her level, brushed the hair from her cheek, and said, "Call us whatever you want. We are your family." And I meant it. Every word. That night, after dinner, the house was full of soft sounds, dishes in the sink, water running, the hum of her nightlight. I stood by the front door, lights glowing behind me, the warmth of something whole settling into the corners of our home. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, but safe. The kind of quiet that tells you it's over now. Sometimes, the quietest voice in the room is the most important. And this time, we heard her.